Welcome to our deep dive
Deep dive.
into
Right.
really, really big questions like the nature of reality itself.
Yeah.
And I have to say I'm kind of excited and terrified at the same time
I know, right?
because you sent me all these excerpts from like physicists, philosophers, computer scientists.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. It is. It's like, what is even real anymore after reading all this stuff?
Right. It's like we're putting together this giant puzzle, but we don't even know what the picture's supposed to be yet.
Exactly. Yeah. We're questioning the very pieces of the puzzle themselves.
Okay, so where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, I think one of the most mind-blowing places to start is with this idea of digital physics.
Hmm.
Have you ever thought that maybe, just maybe, the universe is basically like a giant computer program?
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read that, I was like, okay, this is where things get a little too sci-fi for me.
Yeah, yeah.
But then the more I thought about it, the more it kind of started to make sense. Like everything's information these days, right? Our phones, the internet, even our DNA.
Absolutely. And that's where this concept of information being the most fundamental element of reality comes in. It's not just about the data on our devices, but the very fabric of the universe itself. Like, what if instead of atoms or quarks, it's all just information at the most basic level?
Okay, so then that leads to this whole digital physics thing, right? Where the universe is running on algorithms, kind of like a giant computer.
Exactly. Like Alan Turing showed us, with those early computers, anything can be computed with the right set of instructions. So what if the universe has its own set of instructions, its own code?
Whoa, okay. But then what about us? What about our brains? They're part of the universe too, right?
Exactly. And that's where some of those sources you sent really dive into this concept of the free energy principle. It suggests that our brains are basically like prediction machines, constantly trying to minimize surprise by building models of the world around them.
So my brain's like running simulations all the time.
In a way, yes, drawing on past experiences to anticipate the future.
Ah, okay. So it's all about like minimizing those, oh, I didn't see that coming moments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it applies to everything, how we perceive the world, how we make decisions. Even mental health can be understood through this lens. If our models are too rigid or they have trouble updating with new information, that's when things can go awry.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm following this, we've got the universe maybe being like a giant program and our brains being part of that program, building models to navigate reality.
You got it. And the common thread here is information being the most fundamental element at play.
Okay, but if it's all information at the core, does that mean anything's actually real in the way we usually think about it? Like, what about all the stuff we see and touch, the physical world around us?
Ah, now you're getting to the heart of the matter. That's where Donald Hoffman's work comes in, and it's a real head-scratcher. He argues that our perceptions are more like a user interface than reality itself.
A user interface. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one.
Think about it this way. Our senses evolved to help us survive, not to show us the world with perfect accuracy.
So we see what we need to see, not necessarily the whole truth.
Exactly. Like icons on your computer desktop, they represent actions you can take, not the complex code underneath. They're practical, not necessarily accurate.
Okay, that makes sense. But there are those times, when reality seems to glitch, like you see something that doesn't fit, or you have that feeling of, wait, have I been here before?
You're talking about the trash stratum, like cracks in the facade of our perception, hints at the structure underneath.
Like when a video game character clips through a wall or something.
Exactly. It makes you question what's real and what's just part of the program, so to speak.
Which gets even weirder when you consider that our sense of self might also be a construct, like that ego tunnel idea, that our I is more of a mental simulation than a solid thing.
Right. That's Thomas Metzinger's work. And it really pushes us to question everything we think we know about ourselves and the world around us. If our sense of self is an illusion, what else might be?
Okay, so we've gone from the universe as a computer to our brains as prediction machines to our perceptions potentially being completely unreliable. I'm not sure if I should be amazed or terrified at this point.
Well, hold on to your hat because we haven't even touched on the multiverse yet.
Oh boy, here we go. Multiverse time. So you're talking about David Deutsch and the many worlds interpretation. I'm ready to have my mind blown wide open.
Get ready, it's a wild one. Essentially, it suggests that every quantum measurement, every tiny decision at the subatomic level, doesn't just have one outcome, but splits off into a multitude of universes, each representing a different possibility.
So like every time I have to choose between coffee or tea in the morning, a whole new universe is created where I made the opposite choice.
That's a simplified way of putting it, but yes. This interpretation tries to make sense of how quantum mechanics works. where particles can be in multiple states at once until they're observed. Instead of reality collapsing into one outcome, every outcome actually happens, just in different branches of reality.
Okay, so reality is constantly branching off into infinite possibilities. I'm definitely going to need a minute to process that one. But how does this connect to Deutsch's constructor theory? That was another one that made my head spin.
Constructor theory shifts the focus from specific events to what's fundamentally possible or impossible in the universe. It's like defining the rules of the game, rather than describing what happened in a particular playthrough.
So less about the specific history and more about the laws that govern what can happen.
Exactly. And when you combine that with the multiverse idea, it suggests that reality has this vast, almost limitless potential, all based on what those laws allow.
So we've got the multiverse as this huge canvas of possibilities, and constructor theory lays out the rules for what can be painted on that canvas. That's a pretty wild image.
It is. And it has some pretty wild implications, like if the universe allows for complexity to emerge, then maybe life and intelligence aren't just flukes, but inevitable outcomes of those universal laws playing out.
Whoa. So you're saying there could be all sorts of different life forms and intelligences out there in those other universes, all based on how those laws work.
It's definitely a possibility. It opens up even bigger questions about the nature of knowledge itself. If reality is so vast and diverse, how can we even be sure that we know anything at all?
Which is a perfect segue to bring in Kant, right? We've got his critique of pure reason on our list, and it seems very appropriate right about now.
Kant. He's a philosophical heavyweight for sure. And his critique really dives into how our minds shape our experience of reality.
I'll admit I was a little intimidated by this one, but the way I understand it, Kant is saying that our minds aren't just passively taking in information, but actively structuring it through categories like space, time, and causality. Like those are the lenses that we have to use to see the world.
That's the core of it. He argued that these categories aren't things we learn from experience, but rather preconditions for having any experience at all. Like they're built into the operating system of our minds.
So whatever we perceive as reality is already filtered through our mind's own built-in frameworks.
Exactly. We can't escape them. And that challenges the idea of a purely objective reality, because what we experience is always shaped by how our minds work.
Which then makes you wonder how much of what we call knowledge is really about the world itself, and how much is just our own minds making sense of things.
Right. It's a deep rabbit hole to go down. And it gets even more complicated when you consider this eliminative materialism idea, which suggests that a lot of our mental concepts like belief or desire might just be temporary placeholders.
Wait, are you saying our thoughts and feelings might just be like illusions?
Not necessarily illusions, but maybe not the fundamental things we think they are. Eliminative materialism argues that eventually we'll have a purely neuroscientific explanation for them. Like we'll be able to explain them entirely in terms of brain states and processes.
So instead of talking about beliefs, we'll be talking about patterns of neural activity.
Something like that. And it ties back to that digital physics idea, right? If reality is computational, then our brains, as part of reality, could be too.
Okay, so our thoughts and feelings might basically be lines of code running in our brains. My existential crisis is deepening by the minute.
Well, maybe try not to think about it too much. But it does raise some interesting questions about the nature of consciousness and whether our inner lives are more material than we typically assume.
Okay, so we've questioned whether our senses are reliable, whether our sense of self is real, and now whether our thoughts and feelings are even what we think they are. This deep dive is definitely shaking things up.
And we're just getting started. Next up, we're going to explore how genes and memes play into this whole picture of information, replication, and the evolution of reality itself.
All right, bring on the genes and memes. I'm ready for whatever mind-bending insights Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene has in store for us.
It's a classic for a reason. Get ready to see reality through a whole new lens. Welcome back to our deep dive into the nature of reality.
Oh man, my brain is still buzzing from all that stuff about the multiverse and like our minds shaping reality.
Yeah, we definitely covered some mind-bending territory in part one.
For sure.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
Like, where do you even go from there?
Right. But before we like totally abandon the multiverse,
Yeah.
we were talking about simulation theory, right? That one really got me thinking, like, what if we're all just characters in some giant video game?
It's definitely a concept that captures the imagination.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's not just science fiction anymore. Even philosophers and physicists are taking it seriously.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If we are In a simulation,
Yeah.
who created it?
Right. Who are these masterminds behind it all?
And why are they doing it? Like, what's the point?
Are we just data points in some giant experiment?
Well, those are the million-dollar questions. And unfortunately, there are no easy answers.
Ugh, I hate when that happens.
I know, right?
But the sources you sent me, they do offer some interesting possibilities.
It's
Like
fine.
one idea was that these simulators, they could be running tons of simulations.
Yeah.
Maybe to study different scenarios or test out societal structures, like a giant...
Like a cosmic sim city
Yeah.
with entire universes as their playground.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty wild, huh?
Yeah. But also kind of depressing if you think about it.
I know. It can feel that way.
Like we're just lines of code in their grand experiment.
Yeah, but there's also the flip side to consider.
Okay, what's that?
Well, what if the simulators have benevolent intentions?
Okay.
Like maybe they're trying to help us evolve
Really?
or learn something about consciousness itself by observing us.
Oh, so we're not just lab rats. We're like participants in some cosmic learning experience.
That's another way to look at it.
Okay, I like that a lot better.
Yeah, it's a bit more uplifting.
For sure, but even if these simulators are, the good guys,
Yeah.
doesn't that mess with the whole free will thing?
You've hit on a big one there.
I mean, if they program the rules of our universe,
Yeah,
how can our choices really be free?
that's a huge debate.
Really?
Determinism versus free will.
Okay.
It's something philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries.
And simulation theory just adds another layer to it.
Because,
So are you saying free will is an illusion then?
well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Some philosophers argue that free will is compatible with determinism.
How does that work?
They say as long as our choices are determined by our own internal processes,
Yeah.
rather than some external force,
Okay.
we can still be considered free.
But wait, in a simulation, wouldn't our internal processes also be determined by the simulator's code?
You got me there. It's tough to reconcile.
It really is.
But it's a fascinating question to ponder.
It is, for sure.
So maybe we won't crack the free will code today.
Yeah, probably not.
But let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about the implications for morality.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, if our actions are ultimately predetermined or controlled by these simulators, does anything we do really matter?
Right, that's a good point.
If it's all just a game,
Yeah.
do the choices we make within the game have any real weight?
It's like, why bother trying to be good if none of it really matters?
Yeah, some people worry that this kind of thinking could lead to nihilism
I can see that.
or a sense of moral apathy.
Makes sense, I guess. If nothing really matters, why bother with anything?
But I think that's a dangerous path.
Okay, why is that?
Because even if our reality is simulated,
Yeah.
it doesn't negate the reality of our experiences.
Okay.
Our emotions, our relationships,
Right.
suffering is still real,
Yeah.
even if it's simulated suffering.
That's true.
And acts of kindness and compassion still have meaning,
Yeah.
even within the confines of a simulated universe.
So we're still obligated to be decent human beings, even if we're essentially lines of code.
Absolutely. You can even argue that moral choices matter even more in a simulation.
Really?
Because if the simulators are observing us,
Yeah.
maybe they're looking for signs of empathy,
Oh, interesting.
altruism, or moral growth.
Like a test.
Maybe
And the ones who pass get to what?
break free from the simulation,
Oh, wow.
graduate to a higher level of existence.
That would be amazing.
I know, right?
Like winning the ultimate video game.
Exactly.
Wow.
So you see, simulation theory doesn't necessarily diminish the importance of morality.
Yeah, it actually might raise the stakes even higher.
It might.
Now that's a trippy thought.
It is.
But what about our sense of self, our identity?
Oh, good question.
Does simulation theory completely shatter the illusion of who we think we are?
Well, remember Metzinger's ego tunnel idea?
Yeah.
He argues that our sense of self is already a construct.
Right, a virtual reality created by the brain.
So even in base reality,
Yeah.
our identity might be more fluid and less fixed than we typically think.
Oh.
And if reality is a simulation,
Yeah.
it adds another layer to that.
So the I that we experience might be nothing more than a set of algorithms
Yeah.
running in a simulated brain.
It's mind-blowing to consider.
It really is.
But it makes you wonder,
Right.
what happens to our simulated selves when the simulation ends?
Oh, that's a good question.
Do we just blink out of existence?
Like a computer shutting down.
Exactly.
Oh, that's kind of a scary thought.
It is.
All our memories, experiences, just...
Gone.
poof.
Vanished in an instant.
It really makes you appreciate the present moment,
It does.
to make the most of the time we have.
Live authentically, cherish our relationships, all that good stuff.
Right.
Because who knows how long this ride will last.
Exactly.
So we've explored the motives of the simulators, the implications for free will and morality,
Yeah.
and even the possibility that our identities are just lines of code.
Right.
Is there anything else we should consider in this simulation theory world?
Well, there's one thing we haven't talked about yet.
Okay, what's that?
The whole question of suffering.
Oh, right.
Like, why is there so much pain and hardship?
Even if it's just a game. Yeah, even in a simulated world.
It's like, why would the simulators program that in?
Right, it's a puzzle.
It doesn't really make sense.
And simulation theory doesn't offer any easy answers.
I figured.
In fact, it introduces some pretty disturbing possibilities.
No. Like, what?
What if suffering is deliberately built into the simulation's design?
Seriously?
It's a thought, right?
Except why would they do that?
Well, some philosophers have suggested
Okay.
that maybe suffering serves some kind of evolutionary purpose.
Oh.
Like it pushes us to adapt.
To learn, to grow.
Maybe.
But that still seems kind of cruel.
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't they find a less painful way to teach us a lesson?
Well, maybe they're not trying to teach us anything.
What do you mean?
What if it's just for their entertainment?
You're kidding, right?
I know, it sounds crazy,
It does.
but it's a possibility some have considered.
Oh, really?
Like a cosmic reality show where they watch us struggle and overcome adversity.
Oh, that's just messed up.
I know, it's a pretty dark interpretation.
Yeah, for sure.
But it makes you wonder
Yeah, about... Well,
if ignorance is bliss.
sometimes I think it would be easier to just, not think about all this stuff.
Yeah, I get that.
Just believe in a simple, straightforward reality.
Right, but where's the fun in that?
I guess you have a point.
I think there's beauty in confronting the complexity,
Yeah.
questioning our assumptions.
Expanding our minds.
Yeah, even if it gets uncomfortable sometimes.
It's better than living in a delusion.
I agree.
So even if this whole simulation theory thing is a bit unsettling,
You can.
maybe it can help us live more meaningful lives in the present moment.
I like that, a cosmic wake-up call.
Even if it comes from the possibility that our reality isn't quite what it seems.
Right, but hold on, we haven't even talked about the trash stratum yet.
Oh, right. That's the one about glitches in the simulation.
Yeah, like errors in the code.
If our reality is a simulation, shouldn't we see more of those?
It's a compelling argument against a perfectly seamless simulation.
Yeah, like in a video game, you sometimes see those bugs and glitches.
Right, they break the illusion,
Right.
expose the artificial nature of the game.
So are there real-world phenomena that we could interpret as glitches in the Matrix?
Well, there are definitely a lot of unexplained mysteries out there.
Like what?
Déjà vu,
Oh, yeah, I've definitely experienced that.
pre-cognitive dreams,
That one's a little spooky.
or near-death experiences where people report seeing things they shouldn't have been able to see.
Oh, wow.
Some people believe these could be glimpses behind the curtain.
Hints that something more is going on.
Exactly.
I've always been fascinated by that stuff.
I know, it's intriguing, isn't it?
It makes you question everything.
And that's where the trash stratum comes in.
Right.
It encourages us to pay attention to those glitches.
To those moments when reality seems to break down.
Maybe they're not just random occurrences,
Yeah.
but clues to the true nature of our existence.
Wow. So we should be looking for the cracks in the pavement.
The weird coincidences.
The things that science can't explain.
It's exactly.
Like all those fringe science topics might actually be onto something.
They might.
But even if those glitches are real,
Yeah.
and even if our reality is a simulation,
Yeah.
there's still the question of creativity and innovation.
Ah, you're right.
Like, can we still be truly creative
Yeah.
if we're living in a simulated world?
That's a big one.
I mean, if everything is determined by the simulator's code,
Yeah.
wouldn't that limit our ability to come up with something truly new?
It's a valid concern, for sure,
It is.
but I think it might underestimate the potential for emergence and complexity,
Okay.
even within a deterministic system.
What do you mean?
Well, think about the incredible diversity of life on Earth.
Okay.
All those organisms are governed by the same laws of physics and chemistry,
Right.
yet they exhibit remarkable creativity in their adaptations and behaviors.
That's true.
So maybe creativity isn't about breaking the rules entirely,
Yeah.
but about finding new and innovative ways to work within them.
So maybe the simulators have given us a set of tools.
And a playground.
And it's up to us to see what we can create with them.
Exactly. And maybe the most creative acts, the ones that truly push the boundaries,
Yeah.
those are the ones that catch the attention of the simulator.
If they're watching, waiting to see what we come up with.
It's an interesting thought.
It is.
Like, what happens when our creations within the simulation start to rival?
Or even surpass the complexity of the simulation itself.
Yeah.
That's when things could get really interesting.
It is a fascinating possibility.
It's like we evolve to a point where we outgrow the simulation,
Right.
and then we get invited to join the simulators in the base reality.
Maybe that's the ultimate goal.
Like leveling up in a video game.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a pretty wild thought.
It is.
But it highlights how creativity, even within the confines of a simulation, could have consequences that extend far beyond the simulated world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered morality, identity, suffering, and now creativity.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to consider in this simulation theory deep dive?
Well, there's one crucial aspect we haven't touched on yet.
Okay, what's that?
The role of information.
Oh, right. We started this whole thing talking about digital physics.
Yeah.
The idea that information might be the most fundamental element of reality.
Remember, the universe is a giant computer running on algorithms.
Yeah, it's all coming back to me now.
And if reality is a simulation,
Yeah,
it just reinforces that idea.
okay,
The simulation itself would be a vast collection of data,
right.
and our experiences within it
Yeah.
would be generated by processing that data.
So in a way, we are just bits of information being manipulated by some unseen force.
It's a possibility, but it also makes you think
About what?
about whether information itself is a more fundamental concept than we usually assume.
Okay, how so?
Like, maybe it's not just a tool for communication or computation,
Right.
but an intrinsic property of reality.
Okay.
A force that shapes and governs the universe.
Wow. So instead of seeing information as something we created, maybe it's something that pre-exists us and shapes our very existence.
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept.
It is.
And it connects with some ancient wisdom traditions, too.
Really?
Yeah, like mystical and spiritual traditions that view information or knowledge as a divine or cosmic principle.
Wow. We've gone from computer simulations to ancient wisdom in just a few minutes.
It's amazing how these ideas all connect, isn't it?
It really is.
And it shows how exploring the nature of reality can take us on a journey
Yeah.
through science, philosophy, spirituality.
All of it.
And
Yeah.
ultimately,
Mm.
it challenges us to think deeper about who we are and where we fit into this grand scheme of things.
I am definitely feeling challenged right now,
I bet.
but in a good way. Like it's stretching my mind in ways I never thought possible.
That's what we're here for.
This deep dive has been amazing.
It has.
Mind-blowing,
A
thought-provoking.
little terrifying at times.
Yeah, a little bit.
But ultimately, I think it's been a positive experience
I agree.
because it's reminded us of how much we still don't know
Yeah.
and how much there is still to explore.
So maybe the point isn't to find the one right answer,
Right.
but to keep asking questions.
To keep exploring.
And to keep our minds open to new possibilities.
Exactly.
That's a good takeaway.
I think so too, but
What?
we've covered a lot of ground with simulation theory.
Yeah, we have.
And fascinating as it is,
It is.
I think it's time to shift gears.
Okay, where are we headed next?
Well, how about we explore some alternative theories about the nature of reality?
Oh, cool. I'm all for that. Bring it on. All right, we're back for the final round of our reality-bending, deep dive expert speaker. Round 3, ding, ding, ding.
Exactly, and we've gone through some wild theories.
Yeah, we've explored digital physics, dove headfirst into simulation theory,
Oh yeah.
even dipped our toes into the multiverse.
The multiverse is always a fun one.
It really is, but, you sent over a whole bunch of sources, and I'm sensing there's more to uncover.
Oh, there's always more.
Right, so if reality isn't just a giant computer simulation,
Yeah.
what else could it be?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. Where do we even go from here?
Well, one path we could explore is process philosophy.
Okay, process philosophy. I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
Well, you included some of Alfred North Whitehead's work, right?
Yeah, I did.
And he really challenges the traditional view of reality as a bunch of static objects.
Okay.
Instead, he proposes that reality is fundamentally a dynamic process of becoming,
So instead of things just being, they're constantly changing.
evolving, transforming.
It's all about the verb, not the noun.
You got it.
I like that. It feels very organic and dynamic.
It is. It's a very different way of looking at the world.
For sure.
Like, imagine the universe as this interconnected web of events,
Uh-huh.
where each event is influenced by the past and shapes the future.
So everything's connected and constantly in motion.
Precisely. It's a very holistic view.
I like that. But what about consciousness then? Where does that fit into this process-oriented view?
Great question. For process philosophy, consciousness isn't something that just emerges from complex brains.
Okay.
It's seen as an inherent aspect of reality itself.
Wait, so you're saying that even like a rock or a tree has some level of consciousness?
It might sound strange, I know.
It does a little.
But that's the idea.
Okay.
Every event, even at the subatomic level, has a degree of experience, a degree of awareness.
Whoa, so consciousness is like woven into the fabric of the universe.
Exactly. It challenges that classic separation of mind and matter,
It does.
suggesting that experience is fundamental to reality itself.
That's a big shift from that materialist view we were talking about earlier.
It is. It opens up a whole new way of thinking about the universe.
For sure. So if consciousness is everywhere, does that mean the universe itself has some kind of purpose, some kind of intentionality?
It's a possibility that some philosophers have explored.
Like there's some cosmic consciousness guiding the evolution of everything.
That's one interpretation.
Wow, that's a pretty wild thought.
It is, but it resonates with some spiritual and mystical traditions as well.
Right, the idea of like a universal consciousness or a divine force.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this process view where reality's dynamic, consciousness is everywhere, even rocks might have feelings.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but, there's got to be other perspectives out there.
Oh, there are plenty.
What else do we have in the mix?
Well, you included some sources on physicalism.
Okay, physicalism, remind me what that one's all about.
Physicalism is all about keeping it simple.
Simple. Okay, how so?
It argues that everything in the universe, including consciousness, can ultimately be explained by physical processes.
So it's all just matter and energy at the end of the day?
That's the gist of it.
Okay, but how do you explain something like subjective experience with just atoms and molecules? Like what it actually feels like to see the color red, for example?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's where physicalism runs into some trouble.
Really?
It's called the hard problem of consciousness.
The hard problem sounds intimidating.
It is. It's a real challenge for physicalists.
Okay, why is that?
Because how do you explain those subjective, qualitative aspects of experience using purely physical terms?
Right, it's like I can understand the mechanics of how my brain processes light waves,
Yeah.
but how do those physical processes create the actual feeling of redness?
It's hard to bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's like where does the experience itself come from?
And that's where physicalists have come up with various solutions.
Okay, like what?
Some try to reduce consciousness to brain states.
So our feelings and thoughts are just patterns of neurons firing?
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Others claim that consciousness is an illusion altogether.
Wait, so you're saying I don't actually exist?
Not quite, but it's like saying the experience of consciousness is a kind of trick that our brains play on us.
So either way, it's not really what it seems.
Pretty much.
Okay, so both options seem kind of unsatisfying.
They do.
Like reducing consciousness to just brain states seems to miss the point.
Yeah, it doesn't quite capture the richness of our inner lives.
Right, and saying it's all an illusion just feels wrong.
It does.
Like, I know I'm experiencing something, even if I can't fully explain it.
Exactly. And that's a big reason why some thinkers have turned to those alternatives we discussed earlier.
Okay, like process philosophy.
Right, or even more radical ideas like panpsychism.
Panpsychism. All right, I'm all ears. What's that one about?
Well, if process philosophy says consciousness is inherent to reality,
Yeah.
panpsychism takes it a step further.
How so?
It proposes that consciousness is a property of the universe itself, present in everything.
Hold on, so not just living things.
Everything, from the tiniest particles to the largest stars.
Whoa, so everything has a little bit of consciousness, even a rock.
That's the basic idea.
Okay, that's pretty out there, I have to admit.
It is.
But it does seem to address some of the problems that physicalism struggles with.
It does.
Like, if consciousness is a fundamental property of everything, then it's not so strange that we experience it, right?
Right. It becomes a basic building block of reality.
I can see how that would make sense to some people. All right, so we've gone from the universe as a computer to rocks having feelings.
From a simulated reality to a universe where everything is conscious.
Talk about a wild ride. It feels like we've explored the entire landscape of possible realities.
And that's the beauty of this deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah, we may not have all the answers.
But we've expanded our understanding of what's possible.
For sure.
We've challenged our assumptions.
And encountered some truly mind-blowing ideas.
Exactly.
It's like reality is this giant mystery box.
And we're just starting to peek inside.
Right, maybe there isn't one right answer, but the journey of exploring all these possibilities, that's what makes it so fascinating.
I agree, and it's a reminder that the search for truth is an ongoing process.
It's not about finding the final destination
It's about enjoying the journey.
and keeping our minds open to new ideas and new perspectives along the way.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
I think so too.
We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
from the smallest particles to the vastness of the multiverse.
It's been a wild ride.
It really has. But you know what?
What's that?
I feel like I've learned a lot.
I hope so.
And even though we didn't find all the answers,
We never do.
I feel more curious than ever.
Curiosity is key.
It is.
It's what keeps us exploring, keeps us learning.
So to everyone listening out there, keep those minds open, keep those questions coming.
Because the search for the true nature of reality.
It's an adventure that never ends.